The ivory crest pavilion glowed like a jewel against the darkening sky, its crystalline architecture catching the last rays of sunset and scattering them into 1,000 points of light. Inside, 300 of Silicon Valley's most influential figures gathered beneath chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Women draped in designer gowns laughed behind champagne flutes, while men in custom suits discussed venture capital and acquisition deals. The air hummed with wealth, power, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about tomorrow. At the center of it all stood Julian Cross, Tech Visionary magazine's latest cover star, his hand resting possessively on the waist of his bride-to-be, Serena Vale. They looked like they'd been plucked from a fairy tale and dropped into the modern world. Him in a Tom Ford tuxedo that probably cost more than a used car, her in a gown so white it seemed to glow with its own light. Camera flashes erupted like small explosions as guests captured every moment for Instagram, Twitter, and whatever new platform would make them look important. "Julian, over here. One more," a photographer shouted. Julian smiled, that practiced, photogenic smile that had graced a dozen magazine covers in the past 18 months. He turned slightly, pulling Serena closer, and for a moment the crowd seemed to hold its breath at the perfection of it all. That's when the servers began moving through the crowd with their trays of hors d'oeuvres. One of them, a young black woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, moved carefully through the clusters of guests. Her uniform, black slacks and a crisp white shirt beneath a black vest, marked her as invisible in this world of silk and diamonds. She balanced her tray with the kind of careful attention that comes from knowing you can't afford to make mistakes. Her movements were precise, economical, the behavior of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. She was 7 months pregnant. The pregnancy wasn't immediately obvious beneath the loose-fitting uniform shirt, but it was there in the way she moved, in the slight sway of her back, in how she had to shift her weight to accommodate the tray. She kept her eyes down, focusing on the geometric patterns of the marble floor, counting steps between guests, breathing steadily through her nose. "Just get through tonight," she told herself. "Just 4 more hours. 4 more hours, and you can pay the electric bill. 4 more hours, and maybe you can buy diapers in advance. 4 more hours and, excuse me, miss? Could I get one of those?" She looked up, fixed her face into a polite smile, and extended the tray toward an older woman in emeralds. "Of course, ma'am." The woman took a small pastry without looking at her, already turning back to her conversation about someone's disappointing vacation home in the Hamptons. The server moved on, weaving between clusters of laughter and clinking glasses, her feet already beginning to ache in the sensible flats she'd bought secondhand. "Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy educational stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too." She had worked dozens of events like this over the past few months. The formula was always the same. Arrive early, keep your head down, serve with a smile, collect your check, go home. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't exist beyond your function. She had perfected the art of being furniture with a pulse. But tonight was different. She felt at the moment she'd walked into the venue and seen the seating chart near the entrance, seen the name printed in elegant calligraphy at the top, Julian Cross and Serena Vale. Her stomach had dropped so fast she'd had to grip the edge of a table to steady herself. The agency hadn't told her the client's name, just an address, a time, and a promise of payment that she desperately needed. Now she was here, in his space, serving at his wedding. She'd considered walking out the moment she realized. Her friend Lena had begged her not to take the job in the first place. "You're 7 months pregnant and exhausted," Lena had said, sitting in Amara's cramped studio apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and eviction notices. "You need to rest, not stand on your feet for 12 hours serving people who won't even see you." But Amara Cole didn't have the luxury of rest. Rest didn't pay the overdue rent. Rest didn't keep the lights on. Rest didn't prepare for a baby that would arrive in 9 weeks whether or not she was ready. So she'd come. And now she was trapped in a nightmare dressed as a fairy tale. She moved toward the far corner of the ballroom, trying to position herself where Julian was least likely to look. The room was massive, easily 10,000 square feet of polished marble and soaring ceilings. So maybe, just maybe, she could finish her shift without him noticing. That hope died when their eyes met across the room. She froze mid-step, the tray suddenly feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. Julian stood near the makeshift altar, surrounded by groomsmen in matching tuxedos, laughing at something one of them had said. But his eyes had drifted, scanning the crowd with the casual ownership of a man surveying his kingdom, and they'd landed on her. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. His expression shifted so subtly that anyone else might have missed it. A slight tightening around the eyes, a microscopic change in the set of his jaw. Recognition. Then something else. Something that made Amara's blood run cold even in the warmth of the crowded room. He smiled. Not the magazine cover smile he'd been flashing at cameras all night. This smile was smaller, private, and infinitely more dangerous. It was the smile of a man who'd just realized he held all the cards and was deciding which ones to play. Amara forced herself to look away, to keep moving, to pretend she hadn't seen him. Her hands trembled slightly as she offered canapes to a group of tech bros discussing cryptocurrency. They took food without acknowledging her existence, which tonight felt like a mercy. She needed to leave. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to set down the tray, walk to the service entrance, and disappear into the night. Let the agency find someone else. Let Julian have his perfect wedding without the ghost of his past haunting the edges of his celebration. But then she thought about the check. $350 for the night, plus potential tips. That was the electricity bill and groceries for 2 weeks. That was prenatal vitamins and a used bassinet she'd seen on Facebook Marketplace. That was survival for another month in a city that devoured people like her. So she stayed. The ceremony began 20 minutes later. Amara positioned herself near the kitchen entrance, far from the main seating area, as guests settled into white chairs arranged in perfect rows. A string quartet played something classical and expensive sounding. Serena appeared at the back of the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than Amara had earned in the past year, and the crowd rose to its feet in a synchronized wave of admiration. Amara watched from the shadows as Julian took Serena's hands, as they exchanged vows written by a professional speechwriter, as he slipped a ring onto her finger that caught the light and scattered it like broken promises. She watched him play the role of devoted groom, watched him perform love for an audience that ate it up like the expensive appetizers they'd been devouring all evening. And she remembered. 3 years ago, Julian had been different. Or maybe he'd been exactly the same, and she'd just been too naive to see it. She'd met him at a startup networking event when he was nobody, just another dreamer with a pitch deck and charisma to spare. CrossNova Solutions had been barely more than an idea, a handful of lines of code, and a website built on a free template. I'm going to change everything, he'd told her over cheap wine in a bar that no longer existed. I can see it so clearly, Amara. In 5 years, we'll be the company everyone wishes they'd invested in early. In 10 years, we'll be a household name. She'd believed him. More than that, she'd helped him. She'd used her marketing degree to build his brand strategy, had stayed up until 3 in the morning editing pitch presentations, had introduced him to every professional contact she'd spent years cultivating. When her salary from her agency job had been the only steady income between them, she'd covered rent, groceries, and the endless stream of costs that came with building something from nothing. We're a team, he'd said, pulling her close in their cramped apartment. When this takes off, it's going to be our success. Yours and mine. I couldn't do this without you. She'd loved him. Fully, completely, with the kind of idealistic devotion that believed love and partnership were the same thing. She'd seen their future stretching out before them. Success, marriage, children, the life they'd build together from the ashes of their humble beginnings. The pregnancy hadn't been planned, but when she'd seen those 2 pink lines on the test, she'd felt something close to joy. They were finally stable. CrossNova had just closed its series of funding round. Julian had been featured in TechCrunch. The struggling phase was over. They could do this. They were ready. She'd told him over dinner at the nicer restaurant they could finally afford, had watched his face as the news registered. And she'd watched that face close like a door slamming shut. You're joking, he'd said, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. I know it's unexpected, but unexpected? Amara, this is catastrophic. I'm in the middle of the most important phase of the company's development. We're meeting with investors next week who could triple our valuation. This is literally the worst possible timing. I didn't plan it, Julian. But it's happening. We're having a baby. No, He'd set down his fork with careful precision, his voice dropping to that low, controlled register that always preceded his coldest decisions. We're not doing this. You need to handle it. Quietly. Quickly. Before this becomes a problem. Handle it? You mean? I mean exactly what you think I mean. This doesn't work for me right now. For us. For the life we're building. She'd stared at him across the table, across the suddenly unbridgeable distance between them, and realized she'd been sleeping next to a stranger for 3 years. The argument that followed had been brutal. He'd accused her of trying to trap him, of being selfish, of not understanding the stakes. She'd accused him of being heartless, of using her, of forgetting every promise he'd ever made. They'd said things that couldn't be unsaid, revealed truths that couldn't be hidden again. 2 weeks later, he'd filed for divorce. The legal process had been swift and merciless. He'd had lawyers, good ones, who made sure he walked away clean. The apartment had been in his name. The car had been in his name. The bank accounts had been in his name. She'd signed a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a settlement that barely covered 2 months of rent, and suddenly she was alone in a city where alone meant invisible. He'd erased her from his narrative completely. Press profiles of his rapid rise never mentioned a wife, a partner, or anyone who'd helped him get there. He was the self-made genius, the visionary who'd pulled himself up by his bootstraps, the man who proved that raw talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. And Amara? She'd become a ghost. Now, standing in the shadows of his wedding reception, watching him dance with his beautiful bride while guests applauded, she felt that ghosthood like a physical weight. She was here, but not here. Present, but erased. Holding a tray of expensive food in a room full of people who would never know her name. The reception shifted into full swing. Dinner was served, courses of food that Amara and her team of servers delivered with mechanical efficiency. Julian gave a speech about love and partnership and building a future together that made Amara's stomach turn. Serena gave a speech about finding her soulmate that made Amara want to scream a warning across the room. But she stayed quiet. She served. She smiled when appropriate. She became the invisible support system that made luxury events feel effortless for those who attended them. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Julian approached her directly. She was refilling champagne flutes at the bar when she felt him step into her peripheral vision. She kept her eyes on the bottles, on the precise pour, on anything except his face. Amara. His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, confident, with that underlying edge that always suggested he was the smartest person in any room. She didn't look up. Congratulations on your wedding, sir. Sir? That's how we're playing this. I'm working. You're a guest. That's the appropriate way to address you. He laughed softly, leaning against the bar with the casual ease of someone who'd never been uncomfortable anywhere. You know, when the agency sent over the server list, I have to admit I didn't look at it too carefully. Imagine my surprise when I saw you walk in. I didn't know this was your event. If I had, I wouldn't have taken the job. But you're here now. That must be difficult for you, seeing all this. Seeing what I've built. Seeing who I've become. Finally, she looked at him. Up close, she could see he'd changed since their divorce. He'd filled out slightly, the gaunt hunger of startup poverty replaced by the solid confidence of success. His hair was professionally styled. His skin had the glow of someone who could afford personal trainers and nutritionists and all the maintenance that came with being a public figure. He looked happy, successful, untouched by consequences. I'm happy for you, she lied. I hope you and Serena have a wonderful life together. Oh, we will. Serena's exactly what I need right now. She understands the demands of my position. She's supportive without being needy. She's beautiful, successful, and she comes from the right family. She's perfect for this phase of my life. The cruelty was so casual it took Amara's breath away. She set down the champagne bottle carefully, afraid her shaking hands might drop it. I should get back to work. How far along are you now? 7 months? 8. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. A protective gesture she couldn't control. I really need to. You kept it. After everything I said, after all my very reasonable concerns, you went ahead and kept it anyway. That's incredibly selfish, Amara. You've made your life so much harder than it needed to be. She's not an it. She's my daughter. And whether you think it was reasonable or not doesn't change reality. Your daughter. He smiled that private smile again. I suppose that's technically accurate. Though I'm sure you've noticed I'm not listed on any documents. As far as the state of California is concerned, I don't exist in relation to your situation. Your lawyers made sure of that. Good lawyers are worth every penny. They solve problems before they become problems. Amara felt tears burning behind her eyes and hated herself for it. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Not where 300 people could witness her breaking. "Excuse me," she whispered, and walked away before he could respond. She made it to the service hallway before the first sob broke free. She pressed her back against the cool wall, covering her mouth with both hands, trying to breathe through the panic and rage and grief that crashed over her in waves. This was a mistake. Coming here had been a terrible, terrible mistake. "Hey, are you okay?" Amara looked up to find another server, an older Latino woman with kind eyes, watching her with concern. "I'm fine. Just needed a minute. That guy at the bar was messing with you, wasn't he? The groom. I saw him talking to you. It's nothing. I knew him. Before. It's complicated." The woman nodded slowly, understanding more than Amara had said. "You need anything? Water? A minute to sit down. I just need to get through tonight. That's all. Just get through tonight. Okay, Mija. But if you need backup, you let me know. Men like that." She gestured toward the ballroom. They think the whole world belongs to them. Sometimes they need reminding it doesn't. Amara managed a watery smile. "Thank you. Really. I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. As she walked back into the ballroom, as she picked up her tray and resumed serving people who wouldn't remember her face 5 minutes after she walked away, she felt something building inside her chest. Not just grief or anger or exhaustion, though all of those were present. Something harder. Something that tasted like the moment before lightning strikes. Julian thought he'd won. He thought he'd erased her successfully, thought he'd moved on to bigger and better things, thought the past could be buried under enough success and new relationships and carefully managed PR. He was wrong. Amara didn't know it yet, but the worst moment of Julian Cross's life was about to begin, and she was about to be the one who triggered it. The rest of dinner service passed in a blur of crystal and china and murmured conversations about stock options and real estate investments. Amara moved through the crowds like a shadow, her body on autopilot while her mind raced with memories she'd spent months trying to bury. Every laugh from Julian's table felt like a knife between her ribs. Every time he touched Serena's hand or kissed her cheek, Amara felt the ghost of those gestures, remembered when they'd been directed at her with what she believed was genuine affection. She'd been so stupid, so naive, so willing to believe that love meant something more than convenience and timing. Around 10 o'clock, the DJ announced it was time for speeches. Julian's best man, some tech bro named Bradley who'd made his fortune in cryptocurrency, took the microphone first and delivered a rambling toast about brotherhood and success and living your best life. The crowd cheered and clinked glasses. Several bridesmaids followed, each one prettier than the last, each one gushing about Serena's style and grace, and how perfect she and Julian were together. Amara cleared plates from abandoned tables, trying to time her movements to avoid the main floor. But the ballroom had been designed for maximum visibility. Everywhere was the main floor. There was nowhere to hide. Julian took the microphone last, and the room fell silent in that attentive way reserved for people who commanded respect without having to ask for it. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "Serena and I are incredibly grateful to be surrounded by the people who matter most to us as we start this new chapter of our lives." Amara bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. "When I started CrossNova 3 years ago, I had nothing but an idea and an unwillingness to accept failure. I worked 18-hour days. I ate ramen for dinner more nights than I can count. I slept on an air mattress in an office that was barely bigger than a closet. But I believed in the vision, and I was willing to sacrifice everything to make it real." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Someone shouted, "That's what I'm talking about. What I've learned on this journey is that success isn't just about having the right idea or working hard. It's about knowing who belongs in your life and who doesn't. It's about surrounding yourself with people who elevate you, who understand your vision, who support your ambitions without holding you back." Amara's hands tightened around the empty tray until her knuckles went white. "Serena understands that. From the moment we met, she's been my partner in the truest sense. She celebrates my wins without jealousy. She supports my growth without trying to limit it. She's everything I need and nothing I don't. The crowd applauded. Serena wiped away a delicate tear, her smile radiant. Too many people let the wrong relationships hold them back, Julian continued, and now his eyes drifted toward where Amara stood frozen near the kitchen entrance. They stay in situations that no longer serve them out of guilt or obligation or some misplaced sense of loyalty. But real success requires the courage to make hard choices, to cut away what's holding you down, to be ruthless about protecting your future. Amara felt dizzy. He was talking about her. In front of 300 people, at his own wedding, he was talking about her. So tonight, I want to raise a glass not just to Serena, but to the wisdom of knowing when to let go of the past and embrace the future you deserve. To second chances, to new beginnings, to building a life with someone who actually understands what it takes to win. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Glasses clinked. Someone started chanting, "Julian, Julian, Julian." Amara set down her tray on a nearby table before her shaking hands could drop it. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to get out of this beautiful nightmare before she did something that would make tomorrow's headlines. But as she turned toward the service exit, she found her path blocked by one of Julian's groomsmen, a tall white man with the kind of smirk that suggested he'd never faced real consequences for anything. "Hey, server girl. You look familiar. Do I know you from somewhere?" "Excuse me. I need to get through." "Wait, no seriously. You look really familiar." He peered at her face, his eyes slightly glazed from too much champagne. "Were you on that season of The Bachelor or something? Or maybe, oh shit. OSHIT. You're the ex-wife." His voice carried further than he probably intended. Several nearby guests turned to look. "Please move," Amara said quietly. Guys. The groomsman was already pulling out his phone. "Julian's ex-wife is here. She's working as a server at his wedding." This is fucking insane. More heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Amara felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes settling on her like a physical thing. Julian appeared at her shoulder, so quickly, she almost jumped. His hand closed around her upper arm with gentle but unmistakable pressure. "Thomas, that's enough," he said pleasantly. "You've had too much to drink." "But dude, I said that's enough." The pleasant tone didn't change, but something in Julian's eyes made Thomas step back with his hands raised. "Yeah, okay man. My bad." Julian's grip on Amara's arm tightened slightly. "Why don't you come with me for a moment? We should talk." "I don't think." It wasn't a request. He steered her through the crowd with a smile fixed on his face, nodding at guests who called out congratulations, never breaking his stride. They emerged into a smaller side room, some kind of parlor decorated with the same excessive elegance as the main ballroom. He closed the door behind them, and the sounds of the party became muffled. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was low and dangerous now, all pretense of civility gone. "I'm working. That's all. I didn't know this was your wedding until I got here, and by then I needed the money too badly to leave." "You needed the money." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You always need money, don't you? That was always your excuse. Never enough. Never satisfied. Always wanting more. I wanted basic security. I wanted a partner who didn't abandon me the second things got complicated." "Complicated? You tried to trap me with a pregnancy. You wanted to derail everything I was building so you could play house and pretend we were some kind of normal couple. I never tried to trap you. The pregnancy was an accident, and instead of handling it together like adults, you threw money at me and erased me from your life. Because you were holding me back." His voice rose despite the closed door. "Everything with you was about what we couldn't do, what we couldn't afford, what we should wait for. You wanted to drag me down to your level instead of rising up to mine." Amara stared at him, this man she'd once loved, and saw clearly for perhaps the first time who he really was. Not the charming dreamer she'd fallen for. Not the partner she'd believed in. Just a man who measured people by their usefulness and discarded them when they became inconvenient. "You're right," she said softly. "I was never going to rise to your level. Because your level requires you to stop being human. Don't get philosophical with me. You're a server at my wedding, Amara. Look at yourself. Look at where your choices have led you. You could have been smart. You could have done what I asked and moved on with your life. Instead, you're standing here, 7 months pregnant, serving drinks to my guests for $300. How's that working out for you?" The cruelty in his words took her breath away. But beneath the shock, beneath the humiliation, something else was building. a heat that started in her chest and spread through her entire body. "You're a monster," she whispered. "No, I'm successful. There's a difference. And success requires making hard choices that soft people like you will never understand." "Julian." Serena's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her perfect dress with a confused smile. "Is everything okay? People are asking where you went." Julian's demeanor shifted instantly. The cold mask disappeared, replaced by warm concern. "Everything's fine, baby. Just having a quick word with one of the servers about the timing for dessert service. We'll be right out." Serena's eyes moved from Julian to Amara, and for just a moment something flickered across her face. Recognition maybe, or suspicion, but then she smiled and nodded. "Okay, don't be too long. Your mom wants to take more pictures." She disappeared back into the party, leaving the door slightly ajar. Julian turned back to Amara, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish your shift quietly. You're going to stay out of sight as much as possible. You're going to collect your check and leave. And you're never going to tell anyone about tonight, or about our past relationship. The NDA you signed is still in effect. If you violate it, my lawyers will bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again. Do you understand?" "Perfectly. Good." He adjusted his tie, preparing to return to his celebration. "Oh, and Amara? In case you were wondering, I don't regret any of it. Not the divorce. Not cutting you out. Not moving on. You were a stepping stone. That's all. People like you exist to help people like me rise. Try to remember that the next time you're feeling sorry for yourself." He walked out without waiting for a response, leaving Amara alone in the elegant room with his words echoing in her ears. She stood there for a long moment, breathing carefully, forcing her racing heart to slow. Her hands had curled into fists without her realizing it. Her daughter kicked inside her, a reminder that she wasn't alone even when she felt most isolated. That's when she saw it. The room had a small AV control panel near the door, probably used for presentations or private screenings. And next to it, a charging tablet left behind by staff, its screen showing the ballroom's camera feeds and sound system controls. An idea began forming. Dangerous, reckless, potentially life-destroying, but also justice. She thought about 3 years of silence. 3 years of watching him thrive while she struggled. 3 years of being erased while he built his legend on the foundation of her invisible labor. 3 years of carrying the weight of his choices while he faced no consequences. Her phone was in her locker in the staff area. But before the divorce, before everything fell apart, she'd backed up all their messages to a cloud account. Everything. His demands that she terminate the pregnancy. His threats about the NDA. His cold calculations about how much the settlement would cost versus the PR damage of a messy divorce. His confession to a friend, captured in forwarded texts, about how he'd handled the Amara situation. She'd kept them as insurance, though she'd never planned to use them. The NDA was ironclad. Using the messages would mean legal destruction. But standing in that room, still feeling the phantom pressure of his hand on her arm, still hearing him call her a stepping stone, Amara made a decision. She pulled out her phone and started downloading files. 20 minutes later, she was back in the ballroom. Dessert service had begun, elaborate confections that probably cost more per plate than she earned in a week. The wedding planner, a sharp-eyed woman named Marisol Grant, was directing traffic near the main screens where a slideshow of Julian and Serena's relationship photos played on loop. Amara approached her quietly. "Excuse me, Ms. Grant." "Yes? What is it?" "I was asked to inform you that Mr. Cross would like to add something to the slideshow. He said it's a surprise for his bride." Amara's voice was steady despite her pounding heart. "He gave me this drive and asked if you could add it before the cake cutting." It was a gamble. A massive, potentially catastrophic gamble. But Marisol was busy, stressed, and being pulled in 12 directions at once. She looked at the USB drive in Amara's hand with barely concealed frustration. "He couldn't tell me himself? He's with his mother taking photos. He said it's very important. A surprise message he recorded." Marisol sighed. "Fine. Give it here." She plugged the drive into her laptop without checking the contents. Why would she? A server had no reason to lie, and Julian Cross had no reason to sabotage his own wedding. Except the drive wasn't from Julian. It was from Amara, and it contained everything. "It'll start playing after this current slideshow ends," Marisol said, already moving on to the next crisis. "That's in about 3 minutes." "Thank you," Amara whispered. She backed away slowly, her entire body thrumming with adrenaline and terror and something that might have been hope. She'd just lit a match. In 3 minutes, the whole building would burn. She should leave. Get out before the explosion. But something kept her rooted to the spot near the kitchen entrance, watching the screens, counting down the seconds. The slideshow of romantic photos faded to black. The room quieted slightly as people turned their attention to the screens, expecting another charming montage. Instead, white text appeared. Before you cut the cake, there's something the groom would like to share. Then came Julian's voice, clear and unmistakable, from a recording Amara had made during one of their final arguments. I'm not interested in being a father, Amara. I'm interested in building an empire. You and this pregnancy are obstacles to that goal. The room went silent. Julian's face drained of color as he spun toward the screens. What I'm offering you is more than generous, his recorded voice continued. Take the money. Sign the papers. Get rid of it. Move on. If you don't, I'll make sure you regret it. I have lawyers who will destroy you. I have resources you can't even imagine. You'll end up with nothing. On screen, text messages began scrolling. Screenshot after screenshot of their conversation history. Julian demanding she get an abortion. Julian threatening her with legal action if she pursued child support. Julian calculating how much the NDA would cost versus potential damage to his reputation. Julian telling a friend, I handled it. She signed. She's gone. Problem solved. Someone gasped. Then another person. The silence broke into confused murmuring. Turn it off. Julian shouted, lunging toward Marisol. Turn it the fuck off. But Marisol was frozen, staring at the screens in horror. More messages appeared. More proof. A timeline of abandonment and manipulation and calculated cruelty. Everything he'd done. Everything he'd said. Everything he'd threatened. And then, a final video clip. It was from earlier tonight. From a camera near the bar that Amara had accessed through the AV system. Julian talking to her, his voice crystal clear. You were a stepping stone. That's all. People like you exist to help people like me rise. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Serena stood frozen near the cake table, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning horror as she watched her groom's words play across 6 massive screens. The elegant updo of her hair seemed suddenly too tight, like it was pulling at her scalp. Her champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor, but the sound was lost in the rising tide of voices. Julian. Her voice was small, almost childlike. What is she talking about? What pregnancy? Julian wasn't listening. He'd grabbed Marisol's laptop and was frantically hitting keys, trying to stop the presentation, but the file had already distributed across all the ballroom's displays. His face was red, veins standing out on his forehead, his carefully maintained composure cracking like cheap plaster. This is a hack. Someone hacked the system. He spun toward his guests, his hands raised as if he could physically push back their stares. This is sabotage. Corporate espionage. This is your voice, man. One of his investors, a silver-haired man in his 60s who'd given Julian his first major check, stood up slowly. That's your voice on those recordings. It's been edited. Manipulated. You can't seriously believe. Julian Cross. Amara's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Every head in the room turned toward her. She stood near the kitchen entrance, still in her server's uniform, one hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady, strong, unbreakable. My name is Amara Cole. I was married to Julian for 2 years. I supported him financially and emotionally while he built Cross Nova Solutions. When I got pregnant with his child, he demanded I terminate the pregnancy. When I refused, he divorced me, forced me to sign an NDA, and cut off all support. I've been working 3 jobs while 7 months pregnant because he erased me from his life and pretended I never existed. She's lying. Julian shouted. She's a disgruntled ex trying to ruin my life. Everyone, please, don't listen to her. She's mentally unstable. I'm standing right here, Julian. Amara walked slowly into the center of the room. Guests parted around her like water. I'm not a ghost. I'm not a stepping stone. I'm a person. And I'm your daughter's mother whether you acknowledge it or not. Serena made a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. You have a daughter? I don't. She's not. Julian's carefully constructed sentences were falling apart. Serena, baby, please. This is all a misunderstanding. She's trying to extort me. She wants money. This whole thing is a setup. A setup? Amara laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I planned this? I took this catering job because I needed $350 to keep my electricity on. I didn't know it was your wedding until I arrived. But yes, Julian, when I realized I was standing in your perfect celebration, serving you and your perfect bride while 7 months pregnant with your child, I decided the truth needed to come out. You violated an NDA. Julian's voice rose to almost a shout. You signed a legally binding agreement. My lawyers will. Your lawyers will what, Julian? Sue me for telling the truth? Take me to court where all of this will become public record anyway? Go ahead. I have nothing left to lose. You made sure of that. A phone camera appeared. Then another. Within seconds, a dozen guests were recording, the modern instinct to document overwhelming any sense of propriety. Serena's mother, an elegant woman in her 60s wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country's GDP, stood up and took her daughter's arm. Serena, we're leaving. Now. Mom, I need to understand what. Now, Serena. But Serena pulled away from her mother's grasp, walking slowly toward Julian. Her dress rustled like whispered accusations. When she reached him, she looked up at his face as if seeing him for the first time. Is it true? She asked quietly. Any of it. Serena, I can explain. Is it true? Julian's jaw worked silently. Around them, 300 people waited for his answer. The moment stretched and stretched until it felt like time itself had stopped moving. It was complicated, he finally said. The situation was complicated. She doesn't understand the pressure I was under, the impossible position she put me in. Serena's hand moved so fast Julian barely had time to register it. The slap echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. You bastard, she whispered. You absolute bastard. She yanked the engagement ring off her finger and threw it at his feet. The ring bounced twice on the marble and came to rest near his polished shoe. Then she turned and walked toward Amara. Amara tensed, unsure what was coming. An attack? More accusations? But Serena stopped a few feet away, her perfect makeup streaked with tears, and said quietly, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If I had known, if he'd told me any of this. You couldn't have known, Amara said. He's very good at controlling narratives. Is there anything I can do? Anything you need? Before Amara could answer, Julian's voice cut through the moment. This is insane. All of you are insane. Serena, get back here right now. We're not doing this. We're not throwing away everything we've built because of some bitter ex's manipulation. Serena turned slowly. Everything we've built? Julian, we've known each other 8 months. 8 months of you love-bombing me with expensive gifts and exotic trips and promises about our future together. And apparently the entire time you had a pregnant ex-wife you'd abandoned. So no, I don't think we built anything. I think you built a lie, and I was stupid enough to believe it. You're making a mistake. You're letting her. The only mistake was believing you were who you pretended to be. Serena looked around at the assembled guests, at the elaborate decorations, at the cake that would never be cut. The wedding's over. Everyone should leave. Chaos erupted. Guests began gathering belongings, some rushing for exits, others clustering in corners to gossip, all of them pulling out phones to text friends about what they'd just witnessed. Julian's business partners huddled in a tight group, their expressions ranging from shock to calculation as they weighed the implications for their investments. His mother appeared from somewhere in the crowd, her face a mask of forced dignity, and began trying to usher people out while maintaining a fiction of control. Bradley, the cryptocurrency best man, approached Julian cautiously. Dude, we need to get you out of here. This is bad. This is really bad. I'm not leaving. This is my wedding. She can't just. Your wedding's over, man. Look around. It's done. Julian seemed to see the disintegrating celebration for the first time. The empty chairs. The abandoned tables. The streams of guests heading for exits while pulling up their phones to spread the news. His empire of an evening collapsing in real time. His eyes found Amara across the room, and the look he gave her was pure venom. You're going to regret this, he said, his voice carrying despite the chaos. You think you've won something here? You've destroyed yourself. No one will hire you. No one will trust you. You'll be the crazy ex who crashed a wedding. You'll be a cautionary tale about bitterness and jealousy. And when your daughter asks why her life is so hard, You can tell her it's because her mother couldn't let go. Amara met his eyes without flinching. I'll tell her that her mother chose truth over silence. That she refused to let powerful men erase her. That she stood up even when it was terrifying. And I'll tell her that's more important than any career or reputation or comfortable lie. Beautiful speech. Let's see how beautiful it sounds when you're homeless. Julian. Serena's voice cracked like a whip. Get out. Get out of here before I call security and have you removed from your own wedding venue. You can't. I can. My name is on the contract too. And right now, you're trespassing on my event. Leave. For a moment, it seemed like Julian might argue further. But something in Serena's face, or perhaps in the faces of everyone still remaining, watching him with expressions ranging from pity to disgust, finally broke through his armor. He straightened his jacket with shaking hands, fixed his hair with automatic vanity, and walked toward the exit with his shoulders back and his head high, playing the dignified victim even in defeat. Bradley and 2 other groomsmen hurried after him, leaving behind a ballroom full of wreckage and witnesses. The moment the doors closed behind him, Amara's knees buckled. She didn't fall. Serena caught her, one arm around her waist, supporting her weight. The older server who'd been kind to her earlier appeared on her other side, and together they helped her into one of the abandoned chairs. Breathe, Serena said gently. Just breathe. It's over. It's not over, Amara whispered. He's right. This is just the beginning. His lawyers will come after me. The NDA violation alone will destroy me. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I couldn't let him get away with it. He won't get away with it. The voice came from an older black woman who'd approached their little cluster. She was in her 50s, wearing a sharp blazer over her evening gown, and she handed Amara a business card. My name is Naomi Reed. I'm an attorney, and I specialize in cases exactly like yours. What happened to you is unconscionable. That NDA was signed under duress, and I'd bet good money it won't hold up in court if challenged properly. I can't afford. Pro bono. I watched what you just did, and I heard what he said to you. Men like Julian Cross think they can use money and power and legal agreements to silence women. They need to learn they're wrong. Naomi glanced at Serena. Both of you do. If you're willing to make statements and pursue this legally, I'll handle your case free of charge. Serena stared at the attorney. You want me to testify against him? I want you to tell the truth. Whatever that truth is. But yes, if you're willing, your testimony about his character and the way he conducted this relationship would be valuable. I'll do it, Serena said immediately. Whatever you need. I want him to face consequences for this. Marisol, the wedding planner, appeared with a glass of water for Amara. I'm so sorry. I had no idea what was on that drive. If I'd known, you would have stopped me from playing it, Amara said quietly. It's okay. I'm the one who lied to you. I'm sorry for putting you in that position. Don't apologize. What he did to you is horrific. Marisol glanced at Naomi. If you need my testimony too, I'll provide it. I heard him talking to her earlier near the bar. The way he spoke to her was cruel beyond belief. One by one, others came forward. Guests who'd witnessed Julian's behavior. Staff who'd overheard conversations. A photographer who'd captured images of Julian confronting Amara earlier in the evening. They offered cards, contact information, statements. A coalition of witnesses building around the truth. Not everyone, of course. Some guests slipped out quietly, already calculating how to distance themselves from the scandal. Some of Julian's business associates were probably already on phones with their PR teams, crafting statements about being shocked and disappointed while protecting their investments. But enough people stayed. Enough people cared. Enough people had seen something in Amara's courage that made them want to be part of what came next. You should go home, Naomi said gently. Get rest. This has been traumatic, and you need to take care of yourself and your baby. Can someone drive you? I'll take her, the older server said. My shift's over anyway. Come on, Mija. Let's get you out of here. Amara let herself be guided through the wreckage of the reception, past the untouched cake and the wilting flowers and the abandoned champagne flutes. At the door, she paused and looked back at the ballroom one last time. The screens were dark now. The evidence had been delivered, but she could still see Julian's face in her mind. The shock, the rage, the moment when he realized his careful control had shattered completely. She'd done this. For better or worse, she'd taken the match and struck it. Now she'd have to live with the fire. Outside, the night was cool and clear, a sharp contrast to the overheated chaos inside. The server, whose name was Rosa, led her to an older Honda in the parking lot. "You did a brave thing in there," Rosa said as she started the car. "A scary thing, but brave." "I feel like I just jumped off a cliff," Amara admitted. "I have no idea if there's water at the bottom or rocks. Maybe both. But you jumped. That's what matters. Too many women stay silent their whole lives. You spoke up." They drove through the city in comfortable silence. Amara watched the lights blur past her window and felt the baby moving inside her. In 9 weeks, she'd be responsible for another human life. A daughter who would grow up asking questions about her father. What would Amara tell her? How would she explain any of this? But then she thought about the alternative. If she'd stayed silent. If she'd served quietly and collected her check and let Julian continue his perfect narrative. If she'd taught her daughter through her silence that powerful men could do whatever they wanted without consequence. No, she'd made the right choice. Even if it destroyed her, it was the right choice. Rosa pulled up in front of Amara's building, a rundown complex in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't reached yet. The kind of place where people minded their own business and nothing worked quite right. "Thank you," Amara said, "for everything tonight. For being kind when you didn't have to be. We take care of each other, Mija. That's how we survive. You need anything, you call me, okay?" Rosa pressed a piece of paper into her hand with a phone number scrawled across it. "I mean it. Anything." Amara climbed the stairs to her third-floor studio, her body heavy with exhaustion. Inside, the apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Cramped, cluttered with second-hand baby items, the AC unit wheezing its last breaths. Home. She changed out of her uniform carefully, folded it with automatic neatness, and sat on the edge of her bed. Her phone had been on silent all night. When she turned it back on, it exploded with notifications. Messages from Lena. "OMG, are you okay? Call me. It's going viral." Messages from numbers she didn't recognize, reporters asking for statements, trolls sending abuse, strangers offering support, and one email from an address she didn't recognize with the subject line, "You're not alone." She opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Amara, my name is Justice Evelyn Moore. I'm a family court judge in San Francisco, and I happen to be a guest at tonight's wedding. I want you to know that what I witnessed was one of the bravest acts I've seen in 30 years on the bench. I cannot make any promises about how your case will unfold. That would be inappropriate. But I want you to know that the system has people in it who care about justice. You did the right thing. Stay strong. And get a good lawyer. M." Amara read the email 3 times before she let herself cry. Not the desperate, broken sobs from earlier. These were different tears. Cleaner somehow. Like rain after a long drought. She'd done it. She'd spoken up. And the sky hadn't fallen. Not yet, anyway. Outside her window, the city continued its endless rhythm. Traffic noise. Distant sirens. Someone's music thumping through thin walls. Life, messy and complicated and beautiful and terrifying. Amara placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to be okay." Somewhere across the city, Julian Cross was probably pacing in some expensive hotel suite, calling lawyers, crafting responses, trying to control damage that couldn't be controlled. Let him pace. Let him plan. Let him try. For the first time in 3 years, Amara Cole wasn't afraid of him anymore. And that, she realized, was its own kind of victory. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and viral infamy. Amara woke up the morning after the wedding to find her face plastered across social media. Screenshots from guest videos showing her standing in the center of the ballroom, pregnant and defiant, while Julian's recorded voice played in the background. Someone had edited together a video with dramatic music that had already racked up 15 million views. The hashtag Julian Cross canceled was trending number 2 on Twitter. Her phone rang constantly. Reporters from tech blogs, mainstream news, tabloids, and podcasts all wanted exclusive interviews. Her inbox overflowed with messages from strangers, some supportive, some vicious, all of them treating her life like entertainment. Lena had come over immediately and refused to leave, setting up camp on Amara's lumpy couch and screening calls with the efficiency of a trained bodyguard. "You're not talking to anyone until we know what the legal situation is," Lena insisted, deleting another voicemail from someone claiming to be from TMZ. Naomi said radio silence until she finishes reviewing everything. Amara sat on her bed, staring at her laptop screen where a news article loaded. Tech wunderkind Julian Cross accused of abandoning pregnant wife in wedding day bombshell. Below it, a photo of Julian looking polished and successful next to another photo of Amara in her server's uniform, visibly pregnant, tears streaming down her face. "They make me look pathetic," she murmured. "You look human. There's a difference." Lena sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Amara, you need to understand what's happening here. This isn't just gossip. This is hitting people. Real people. I've been reading the comments. Thousands of women sharing their own stories about being abandoned, about powerful men who faced no consequences, about being silenced by NDAs. You opened a door. I broke a law. The NDA is legally binding. Naomi doesn't think so. She called while you were sleeping. She's been reviewing the agreement, and she thinks she can get it thrown out. Apparently, there's precedent for invalidating NDAs that were signed under duress or that cover up illegal activity. What illegal activity? Refusing to pay child support is illegal, Amara. Even if you signed away your rights, he's still the father. He has legal obligations whether he likes it or not. A knock at the door made them both jump. Lena checked the peephole, then opened it to reveal Naomi Reed with a leather briefcase and an expression that meant business. "Good, you're awake," Naomi said, stepping inside without preamble. "We need to talk about next steps." But first, she pulled out her phone and showed them a screenshot of a statement. "Julian's team released this an hour ago. You should read it." Amara took the phone with trembling hands. The statement was posted on Cross Nova's official letterhead. "Recent events at a private celebration have resulted in misleading narratives about my personal life. While I deeply regret any pain caused to those involved, I want to be clear that the situation has been grossly misrepresented. My ex-wife and I had a complicated relationship that ended amicably with a mutual agreement. Her decision to violate that agreement and disrupt a private event speaks to ongoing instability that I've tried to handle with compassion and discretion. I'm committed to co-parenting in whatever capacity is appropriate and legal, and I hope we can all move forward with dignity. At this time, I'll be taking a brief leave from my position at Cross Nova to focus on personal matters. Thank you for your understanding. Julian Cross." Amara's hands clenched around the phone. "Ended amicably? Ongoing instability? He's still lying. He's still trying to make me the villain." "Of course he is," Naomi said calmly, taking back her phone. "It's a classic Darvo response. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. He's denying the abuse, attacking your credibility, and positioning himself as the real victim of your instability. It's textbook narcissistic damage control. Will people believe him? Some will. Rich, powerful men always have defenders. But look," Naomi pulled up her tablet and showed them a series of social media posts. The response to his statement has been brutal. People are calling him out for the gaslighting. His company's stock dropped 12% this morning. 3 board members have requested emergency meetings. And several prominent venture capitalists have publicly stated they're re-evaluating their relationships with Cross Nova. "Good," Lena said fiercely. "He deserves worse." "Maybe. But right now, we need to focus on protecting Amara legally and financially." Naomi opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I've drafted a response to the NDA violation threat. Essentially, I'm arguing that the agreement is unenforceable because it was signed under economic duress. You had no income, no support, and you were pregnant. Julian's lawyers used your desperation to force your compliance. That's not a valid contract. What if the judge disagrees? Then we go to trial, and everything becomes public record anyway. Every text, every voicemail, every detail of how he treated you. Julian's lawyers know this. My guess is they'll back down rather than face that exposure." Naomi paused. "But I need to be honest with you, Amara. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Julian has resources. He'll hire investigators to dig into your past. He'll try to discredit you in every way possible. Are you prepared for that?" Amara thought about her daughter, about the kind of world she'd be born into, about the lessons Amara wanted to teach her. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm prepared." "Good. Because we're also filing for child support and back pay for the support he should have been providing all along. That alone could be substantial. California law is very clear about parental obligations. Over the next week, Naomi filed a comprehensive legal response that methodically dismantled Julian's narrative. She included sworn statements from Serena about Julian's deception, from Marisol about his threatening behavior toward Amara, from multiple witnesses who'd been at the wedding. She attached financial records showing Amara's desperate poverty contrasted with Julian's growing wealth. She provided medical records documenting the stress and complications of Amara's pregnancy. She built a case not just for child support, but for a pattern of abuse, manipulation, and abandonment. Julian's lawyers responded with their own filing, a vicious document that painted Amara as an unstable gold digger who trapped Julian with a pregnancy and was now trying to extort him for money. They included cherry-picked text messages, questionable expert testimony about her mental state, and accusations that she'd planned the wedding confrontation as a publicity stunt. The media had a field day with both filings. Legal analysts on cable news debated the merits of each side. Think pieces proliferated about toxic masculinity, women's economic vulnerability, and the power dynamics of Silicon Valley. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone thought they understood what had really happened. But through it all, Amara stayed quiet. On Naomi's advice, she gave no interviews, posted nothing on social media, and refused every offer from talk shows and podcasts. Her silence became its own kind of statement, a refusal to perform her pain for an audience. Julian, by contrast, couldn't help himself. He gave a tearful interview to a sympathetic tech blogger, portraying himself as a misunderstood man who tried to do right by an ex-wife who couldn't accept that their relationship was over. He appeared on a podcast to discuss the cancel culture mob and how one mistake shouldn't define a person's entire life. He posted carefully crafted Instagram stories about therapy and growth and learning from difficult experiences. Each appearance made things worse. Each attempt at redemption revealed more of his narcissism. People who'd been on the fence about the situation found themselves disgusted by his self-pity and his inability to take genuine accountability. 3 weeks after the wedding, CrossNova's board placed Julian on permanent leave and installed an interim CEO. The official statement was diplomatic, but everyone understood what it meant. Julian Cross had become a liability. His face was too associated with scandal. His name had become a punchline. And still, the legal battle continued. The court date for the preliminary hearing arrived on a Tuesday morning in late summer. Amara dressed carefully in a modest navy dress that Lena had bought for her. Professional, dignified, nothing that could be used to claim she was seeking attention. She pulled her hair back in a simple bun and wore no jewelry except for a small cross necklace her grandmother had given her years ago. The courthouse was surrounded by reporters and cameras. Naomi had warned her, but the reality was still overwhelming. Microphones thrust toward her face. Questions shouted from multiple directions. Lena gripped her arm tightly, helping her navigate the chaos while Naomi ran interference with clipped, no comments. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Amara had imagined. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the seal of California above the judge's bench. About 30 people filled the gallery, a mix of reporters, legal observers, and supporters Naomi had brought. Serena was there, seated in the back row, and when their eyes met she gave Amara a small, encouraging nod. Julian arrived 10 minutes later with an entourage of lawyers that looked like it cost more per hour than Amara had made in the past year combined. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of wounded dignity. He didn't look at Amara as he took his seat at the defendant's table. All rise for the Honorable Judge Evelyn Moore. Amara's heart stuttered. The same judge who'd sent her that email. The one who'd witnessed everything at the wedding. Judge Moore entered with quiet authority. A black woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She settled behind the bench and surveyed the courtroom with the kind of gaze that suggested she'd seen every trick and heard every lie. "Be seated," she said. Her voice carried easily without needing to be loud. "We're here for a preliminary hearing in the matter of Cole versus Cross. Let me be clear from the outset. I was present at the event in question. I witnessed the confrontation that sparked these proceedings. Counsel for the defense, do you wish to request my recusal?" Julian's lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Richard Kellerman, stood. "Your Honor, we would respectfully request." "Request denied," Judge Moore interrupted. My presence at the event gives me first-hand knowledge that will help me evaluate credibility and context. Unless you have evidence of actual bias, which you don't, I'm staying on this case. Now sit down. Kellerman sat, his jaw tight. Ms. Reed, let's hear your opening statement. Naomi stood, and her voice was clear and strong as she laid out Amara's case. She spoke about financial abuse, about abandonment, about the illegal withholding of child support. She described Julian's threats and manipulations. She painted a picture of a man who'd used his resources to silence a woman who'd helped him succeed. When she finished, Kellerman stood for the defense. His strategy became immediately clear: blame Amara for everything. According to him, she'd been a financially irresponsible partner who'd pressured Julian into marriage. The pregnancy had been her attempt to trap him. The NDA had been fair compensation for her agreement to move on. The wedding confrontation had been a calculated publicity stunt designed to extort more money. Your Honor, Kellerman concluded, my client has been vilified in the court of public opinion based on heavily edited recordings and biased testimony. We ask that this court see through the emotional manipulation and recognize this for what it is: a woman who can't accept that a relationship ended and is now using the legal system to harass a successful man. Judge Moore's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went cold. Is that your position? That Ms. Cole, who is 7 months pregnant and working as a server to pay rent, orchestrated an elaborate scheme to harass your client? Yes, Your Honor. That's our position. I see. Ms. Reed, I'd like to hear from your client directly. Ms. Cole, please take the stand. Amara's legs felt shaky as she walked to the witness box. The bailiff swore her in, and she sat down facing the courtroom. Julian finally looked at her, and the contempt in his eyes was like a physical blow. Ms. Cole, Judge Moore said gently, I want you to tell me, in your own words, what happened between you and Mr. Cross. Start from the beginning. So Amara told her story, haltingly at first, then with growing strength. She described meeting Julian, supporting his dreams, believing in their future together. She described the pregnancy and his rejection, the divorce and the NDA signed in desperation, the months of struggling alone while watching him thrive, the terrible coincidence of ending up at his wedding. I didn't plan to confront him, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I went there to work, to earn money to survive. But when I saw him there, so proud of his perfect new life, acting like I'd never existed, something broke inside me. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't let him pretend that what he did was okay. And the recordings you played? Judge Moore asked. How did you obtain those? I made them during our marriage, when things were falling apart. And I kept text message backups. I never planned to use them. But standing in that room, knowing he'd face no consequences, knowing he'd do this to someone else, I couldn't let it continue. Kellerman jumped up. Your Honor, she's admitting to violating the non-disclosure agreement. I'm aware, counsel. Sit down. Judge Moore turned back to Amara. What do you want from these proceedings, Ms. Cole? I want support for my daughter. I want Julian to acknowledge she exists. I want Amara's voice caught. I want him to understand that he can't just erase people when they become inconvenient. That's all. I'm not asking for millions. I just want enough to raise our child with dignity. Thank you, Ms. Cole. You may step down. Judge Moore shuffled papers, then looked up at both tables. Here's how this is going to go. First, regarding the NDA, I'm issuing a preliminary ruling that it's unenforceable. An agreement signed under economic duress while one party is pregnant and without independent legal counsel doesn't meet the standard for a valid contract. You can appeal that if you want, Mr. Kellerman, but I'm confident it will hold. Kellerman's face reddened, but he said nothing. Second, regarding child support, Mr. Cross, I don't care how many lawyers you have or how much money you've made. That child is your legal responsibility. We will establish paternity through DNA testing, and you will pay support consistent with California guidelines. The amount will be substantial given your income. This isn't negotiable. Julian leaned toward Kellerman, whispering frantically, but the lawyer just shook his head. Third, regarding the harassment claims, Mr. Kellerman, your client's position is insulting. I watched him speak to Ms. Cole at his wedding. I heard his tone. I saw his face. What I witnessed was not a man being harassed. It was a man being held accountable, and he didn't like it. Motion denied. Your Honor. Kellerman tried one more time. We respectfully. Counsel, let me be very clear. I've been on this bench for 30 years. I've seen countless cases of powerful men trying to avoid responsibility for their actions. I've watched them use money and lawyers and NDAs to silence women. And every time I have the opportunity to ensure justice is actually served, I take it. This is one of those opportunities. She turned to Julian directly. Mr. Cross, you may have convinced yourself that you're the victim here. You may believe your own PR. But the evidence is overwhelming. You abandoned a pregnant woman you'd promised to support. You used your resources to force her silence. You showed no remorse until you faced consequences. That's not the behavior of someone who made a mistake. That's the behavior of someone who believes the rules don't apply to him. Julian's face was white, his hands gripping the table edge. This court finds in favor of Ms. Cole on all preliminary matters, Judge Moore concluded. We'll schedule a full hearing to determine final support amounts and custody arrangements. Until then, Mr. Cross, I'm ordering you to pay interim support of $15,000 per month, retroactive to the date of this filing. Bailiff, we're adjourned. The gavel came down like thunder. The courtroom erupted in whispers and movement as people rushed for the doors to share the news. Amara sat frozen in her chair, trying to process what had just happened. $15,000 a month. Retroactive support. The NDA invalidated. She'd won. Naomi was suddenly beside her, gripping her shoulder with fierce pride. Breathe, Amara. Just breathe. We did it. I can't. Is this real? It's real. And it's just the beginning. The full hearing will establish permanent support, but this gives you immediate relief. You can pay your rent. Buy what you need for the baby. Stop working yourself to exhaustion. Across the courtroom, Julian was in heated discussion with his lawyers. His face was flushed, his gestures sharp and aggressive. Kellerman kept trying to calm him down, but Julian wasn't listening. Finally, he shoved away from the table and stormed toward the exit, his entourage scrambling to keep up. As he passed Amara's seat, he stopped. For one terrible moment, they were face to face. You think you've won, he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. You think this is over. But I will never forgive you for what you did. Never. I don't need your forgiveness, Julian. I need you to take responsibility for your daughter. That's all I've ever needed. That thing isn't my daughter. It's your mistake. Your burden. And you'll carry it alone, no matter what some judge says. Before Amara could respond, Serena appeared behind Julian. She must have been waiting for this moment. Julian, she said coldly. He turned, and something flickered across his face when he saw her. Serena, don't. Just don't. She looked at Amara. I testified to the investigators about everything I witnessed. Everything you told me about your relationship with him before I came into the picture. I wanted you to know that. Thank you, Amara whispered. You don't need to thank me. I should have seen who he was earlier. I should have questioned why a man who claimed to be single for years suddenly wanted to rush into marriage after 8 months. Serena turned back to Julian. You know what's funny? I actually thought I loved you. I thought we had something real. But you were just using me the same way you used her. The only difference is she figured it out before signing a marriage license. Serena, that's not fair. What we had was over. What we had was over the moment I saw those recordings. Every word you said to her, every threat you made. That's who you really are. And I'm grateful I found out before legally binding myself to it. She walked away without looking back, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor with finality. Julian stood there for a moment, looking lost in a way Amara had never seen him. Then he seemed to shake himself, fixed his face into a mask of indifference, and followed his lawyers out of the courtroom. Outside, the media frenzy was even worse than when they'd arrived. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Naomi had arranged for courthouse security to escort them through a side exit, and within minutes Amara was safely in Naomi's car, the chaos receding behind tinted windows. I need to call Lena, Amara said, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. Already done. She's meeting us at my office. We need to set up your bank account to receive the support payments and discuss next steps. Naomi glanced at her in the rearview mirror. How are you feeling? I don't know. Relieved? Terrified? Like I can't quite believe any of this is real. That's normal. You've been in survival mode for so long that security probably feels foreign. Give yourself time to adjust. At Naomi's office, a modest suite in a building that specialized in family law, Lena was waiting with tears streaming down her face. She pulled Amara into a hug so tight, It was almost painful. You did it. Oh my God, you actually did it. Judge Moore did it. I just told the truth. No, Naomi interrupted firmly. You did this, Amara. You found the courage to speak up when staying silent would have been safer. You stood in that courtroom and faced your abuser. You didn't back down when his lawyers tried to intimidate you. This victory is yours. Own it. Over the next few weeks, Amara slowly began to rebuild her life. The first support payment arrived, and she cried when she saw the amount in her bank account. She paid every overdue bill. She bought a crib, a real one, new, not secondhand. She stocked her kitchen with groceries without calculating every dollar. She scheduled all the prenatal appointments she'd been putting off because she couldn't afford the copays. Small luxuries that weren't luxuries at all. Just basic human dignity. The media attention gradually faded as new scandals captured the public's focus. But the impact of her story continued to ripple outward. Women reached out to share their own experiences of abandonment and silencing. Lawyers contacted Naomi asking about taking similar cases. Organizations working on economic justice and family law reform requested her input on policy changes. And then, 2 weeks before her due date, Serena called. I hope it's okay that I'm contacting you, Serena said. Naomi gave me your number. I wanted to see how you're doing. I'm good. Huge and uncomfortable, but good. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About my role in it. Not the wedding itself, but before. I should have asked more questions when Julian told me he'd never been married, never been serious about anyone. Men don't get to our age without histories, you know? You couldn't have known. He's very convincing. Maybe. But I'm tired of giving powerful men the benefit of the doubt. Serena paused. I've been talking to some friends who've been through similar situations. And I have an idea. What if we started something? An organization that helps women in your position, pregnant and abandoned, dealing with NDAs and expensive lawyers, and the whole system that protects wealthy men. Amara sat down slowly, processing the offer. You mean like a nonprofit? Exactly like a nonprofit. Legal aid, temporary housing, counseling, job placement, everything you needed and couldn't get. I have the money to fund it. You have the experience to shape it. Together we could actually help people. Serena, I'm about to have a baby. I don't know if I can. Not now? In a few months, when you're ready. Just think about it. Because Amara, what happened to you was wrong. But it happens every single day to women who don't have someone like Naomi willing to take their case. Women who sign those NDAs and stay silent forever because they don't have any other choice. We could change that. After the call ended, Amara sat in her apartment, now properly furnished with the support payments, and thought about Serena's proposition. About turning her pain into purpose. About being the help she'd needed when she had none. Her daughter kicked, hard, right against her ribs. A reminder of why any of this mattered. What do you think? Amara whispered, rubbing her belly. Should we help other people like us? The baby kicked again, and Amara smiled. I'll take that as a yes. 9 days later, at 3 a.m, her water broke. Lena drove her to the hospital, both of them terrified and excited and exhausted. The labor was long. 18 hours of pain and breathing and desperate gripping of Lena's hand. But when they finally placed her daughter on her chest, all of it dissolved into wonder. Hi, baby, Amara whispered, staring at the tiny, perfect face. Hi, Zuri. I'm your mama. I've been waiting so long to meet you. Zuri Cole opened her eyes, dark and searching, and seemed to look directly at her mother. And in that moment, Amara understood with perfect clarity that everything she'd been through had led to this. Every hard choice, every moment of courage, every refusal to stay silent. All of it had brought her here, to this hospital room, holding her daughter. She took a photo, just one, of Zuri's tiny hand wrapped around her finger. She posted it to her Instagram account that had been silent for months, with a simple caption, "Worth everything." Within an hour, it had thousands of likes and comments. Messages of congratulation and support from strangers who'd followed her story. But Amara barely noticed. She was too busy memorizing every detail of her daughter's face. Julian never came to the hospital, never called or texted, but the support payments continued arriving every month like clockwork, processed through lawyers and accountants. He'd had his chance to be a father and chosen his image instead. His loss, Amara thought. Because Zuri was perfect. 6 months after Zuri's birth, Amara and Serena officially launched the Second Dawn Collective. They held a small press conference at a community center, with Amara holding Zuri on her hip while explaining their mission. "We're here for women who've been abandoned, silenced, and told their pain doesn't matter," Amara said, her voice strong and clear. "We're here to say you do matter. Your story matters. And you don't have to face this alone." The collective started small, 3 women in their first month, helped with legal referrals and temporary housing. But word spread quickly. Within a year, they were serving dozens of women. Within 2 years, they'd opened a second location and hired a full-time staff. Amara became a sought-after speaker on issues of economic justice and family law. She testified before legislative committees about NDA reform. She wrote op-eds about the ways powerful men weaponized the legal system against vulnerable women. She turned her pain into a platform and her silence into a voice. Julian's career never recovered. Crossnova's board eventually pushed him out entirely, and the company rebranded to distance itself from his legacy. He started a new venture that failed to gain traction. His social media presence dwindled. The tech world that had once celebrated him moved on to newer, shinier visionaries who weren't tainted by scandal. Occasionally, Amara would see an article about him, usually about some failed business deal or another controversy. She'd read them with detached interest, feeling nothing but pity for a man who'd chosen his ego over his humanity. On Zuri's 3rd birthday, Amara took her to the park. They sat on a blanket under a tree, eating cupcakes and watching other children play. Zuri was bright and curious and filled with questions about everything. "Mama, where's my daddy?" she asked suddenly. Amara had been preparing for this question, had discussed it extensively with her therapist. She pulled Zuri into her lap and chose her words carefully. "Your daddy made some choices that meant he couldn't be part of our family," she said gently. "It's not because of you. You're perfect and wonderful and so loved. Sometimes adults make decisions that hurt other people, and your daddy made those kinds of decisions. Does he know about me? He knows. But he decided not to be a part of your life. And that's his loss, sweetheart. Because you're the most amazing person I've ever met." Zuri thought about this seriously, her little face scrunched in concentration. Then she shrugged with the easy acceptance of childhood. "That's okay. I have you and Aunt Lena and Aunt Serena and all my friends. That's a lot of love." "Yes, baby. That's so much love." They sat together in the sunshine, and Amara felt something settle inside her. Peace, maybe. Or just the understanding that she'd done everything she could with the hand she'd been dealt. She thought about that night at the Ivory Crest Pavilion, standing in her server's uniform, making the choice to speak up. How terrified she'd been. How uncertain of what would come next. If she could go back and talk to that version of herself, exhausted, pregnant, desperate, what would she say? That it would hurt. That it would be hard. That the path ahead would be filled with obstacles and setbacks and moments of wanting to give up. But also that she was stronger than she knew. That truth had power. That silence protected abusers, and speaking up protected future victims. That the risk was worth taking. And that 3 years later, she'd be sitting in a park with her beautiful daughter, running an organization that had helped hundreds of women, living a life built on truth instead of silence. She'd survived. More than that, she'd transformed. She'd taken the worst moment of her life and turned it into a movement. That was real power. Not wealth or status or the ability to control narratives. Real power was the courage to tell the truth even when it destroyed you. Real power was choosing your values over your comfort. Real power was refusing to let powerful men decide who you got to be. Julian Cross had tried to erase her. Instead, she'd become unforgettable. As the sun set over the park, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Amara held her daughter close and whispered a promise. "You will grow up knowing that your voice matters. That telling the truth is always worth it. That no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to silence you." Zuri hugged her tight. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. So much." They walked home hand in hand, 2 survivors building a future together. Behind them, the sun disappeared below the horizon. But ahead, the city lights were beginning to sparkle like possibilities. The story that had begun in humiliation and heartbreak had transformed into hope and healing. Not a fairy tale with a perfect ending. Real life was messier than that. But something better, a true story about resilience, accountability, and the revolutionary act of refusing to stay silent. If you've stayed with us through this entire journey, we truly appreciate you. Stories like Amara's remind us that courage can change everything, not just for one person, but for everyone who comes after. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives like this one, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below telling us what you think about Amara's story, or share your own experience with speaking truth to power. Your engagement helps these important stories reach more people who need to hear them. And remember, your voice matters, your truth matters, and you're never alone. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.